Everyone, Matt here again for what was going to be the last video in this series on liminal meditation. I think I'll probably make one more, just kind of thinking over what was covered and um, some other stuff I think may be useful. I'll probably do one more video on the topic, but that stuff aside, I still think this video right now, maybe the one before it, which was about accessing hypnagogia, are probably the two most important videos in the series. The video today will be about working with controlling hypnagogia and hypnopompia. And that being the case, this being one of the more important videos, I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of recap some of the stuff I covered in my previous videos, just so if you haven't watched them, you don't need to watch them. You can kind of just get away with just watching this one, right? So with that being said, kind of hit rewind here. So hypnagogia is basically a state we pass through every time we're going from awake to a sleep, where mental thoughts and images get a lot more vivid. It can even be so much so to where it really is its own style of dreaming, audible, physical sensations, smell, taste, all of that. Then there's this other state, hypnopompia, which we pass through every day when we're waking up out of sleep. So instead of going from awake to a sleep is hypnagogia, a sleep to awake is hypnopompia. Experientially wise, it's pretty much the same thing as hypnagogia, increased thoughts and visuals and images and all of that. A little bit about my background and interest and why I'm even making this whole video series in the first place. So for me, I happen to have stumbled across lucid dreaming, hypnopompia, then hypnagogia in pretty much quick succession, one after another, just by chance. So for me, I started having my first real full-on lucid dreams where I actually had some control over what I was doing within the scenarios I found myself in my early teens. In my first ever dream where this actually happened, I tried to exert too much control, woke myself up out of it, or just blacked the dream out. Then kind of just instinctively I was like, oh shit, what did I do? I messed up, right? I want to get back there. So I just kind of kept my eyes closed and tried to replay what was just happening, replay the dream. And I wasn't able to re-enter it at that point, but what I was able to do was able to notice, oh wow, there's something here to be seen. And I didn't have any word for hypnopompia at the time, but I basically stumbled into hypnopompia, which got me looking for this state again, my own personal time afterwards. A couple of days later, I see this awesome base jumping video of this place, Lautenbrunnen. Really caught my attention. Anyway, later on that day, I'm trying to visualize this on my way to sleep. Get it pretty clear, but the main point here is I was kind of picturing myself running through these trees, jumping off this cliff, and kind of playing that same scenario, that same instance kind of just over and over again. And one time when I did it, I had the very beginning sensations of my stomach dropping. So I had like an actual physical and I also loved that feeling a lot. So it really sparked my interest right there and got me pursuing these things. Granted, when I was 13 and when all this was happening, I had no words for this stuff. My friends weren't into it. It was just kind of something I explored on my own. Fast forward 15, 16 years from then until 2013. Found out about Tibetan dream yoga, the Western approaches to lucid dreaming. Decided to start taking my own lucid dreaming practice, which wasn't even an on-purpose practice, but once I started having these back in my early teens, I basically had lucid dreams about every month or so on average, just from then on out. Anyway, after finding about how much more lucid dreaming could be than fun and pleasure seeking, which is what I was doing those whole 15, 16 years, what I found was being able to surf these liminal mind states, this hypnagogia, hypnopompia mind states, helped me deepen my lucid dreaming practice. In a big way, it was probably the most helpful thing in my lucid dreaming practice, aside from maybe the wake back to bed technique. But either way, so all that experience and all that basically got me putting this series together. All right, so one more thing to recap here, and this is actually the last slide in the previous video I put up. I wanted to make sure to put this in here in case this is the only video in the series you end up watching. You're going to kind of be caught up to everything that's kind of going on. So the first thing I want to point out is that when hypnagogic images come, they will, in the beginning, fade in and fade out. It's not going to be like just one solid, steady picture TV screen you're watching. So what you're trying to do is build stability and confidence in this area and try to train your mind to be able to refine this perspective. Okay, then when it comes to control, I basically like to work with control in this way, where you're trying to influence the scene in certain directions, seed ideas, and work with expectation. When it comes to controlling these things, the best way for me to kind of explain this, and I went back and forth over this, a lot really, but the most simplest way for me to kind of get at it was to categorize hypnagogia into these three broad categories, and kind of talk about how to work with each one of these states, as you're going through them. And they do kind of tend to build on top of each other and progress in this order, although not always. And I know I do like to talk about these things from the hypnagogic side of things, from going from awake to asleep, because that's generally how I like to access them. However, if you're someone who likes to linger in hypnopompia more, maybe you're a slow riser, you got time to lounge around and lay in bed in this kind of in between half awake, half asleep type states, then hypnopompia might be better for you. And really the general themes of my approach here that I'm talking about, seeding ideas, working with influence and expectation, all of that stuff is equally as workable in hypnopompia as it is in hypnagogia. All right, but either way, so working with hypnagogia, if you watch how they start, they generally will start off with this kind of spotty type images where, there's not too much definition in them, right? Then if you watch them build, they'll build into these more solid full type images. Past that, they might even start moving into more like movie type, smooth scene type images. And then one step above that, even you can have this more torrent type, maybe even psychedelic level of imagery going on. And, when it comes to these, I'm just reading over the literature and stuff. Some people will have this type of imagery. I mean, that's the normal hypnagogia. Now, for me to get there, something out of the ordinary got to be happening. Like I got to be like really sleep deprived, with maybe even multiple days of being sleep deprived normally, or maybe I dabbled in some THC or something can kind of get me to that state as well too. But normally speaking, for me, I normally start off with this kind of more spotty type images and then build into real full-on images, and then normally from there I just slip straight into either stage 3-4 deep dreamless sleep, or I just go straight into REM style normal type dreaming. So we'll kind of talk about how to control these as they build. First up, we got spotty type, more ill-defined type imagery. And so for this, they generally tend to come in one of these three broad categories. Like it could be kind of like a soft diffuse light. Maybe there's multiple lights. Maybe they're colors and not just this soft white diffuse light, but some kind of vague approximation of that. Or it might be kind of more streaky type lines, or maybe even like this soft diffuse light, but it's kind of moving. So not necessarily like these vertical lines that I have in the picture. It's kind of just the best approximation I could find without wasting a whole bunch of time on the internet trying to find a better, more appropriate one. Or it could also be this kind of clear night sky star imagery. And you'll probably see versions of all three of these, but when you start to spend more time here, you'll probably see that you see one image more often than others. So for me, that image is this starry night sky. And that's important because this is where the first levels of control can really start to come into play. So what you can start to do here is you can start to learn to actually generate this image in your mind's eye where you literally see it kind of before real actual visual type images start to appear on their own. And so, well, this will kind of be, if you watched my last video and I was talking about accessing hypnagogia, I would say basically you're doing a meditation. You're trying to anchor your awareness to something so your consciousness stays awake while your body falls asleep, right? And so I'll be doing that, and I'll be like basically exhaling as much as I can, relaxing as much as I can, playing, even like trying to play dead on my exhale. I mean, that's how relaxed I'm trying to get. And so really, once I'm at that stage, even if hypnagogic imagery isn't kind of coming through, breaking through my mind on its own, I can actually start to generate this image beforehand. And so normally for me, it will come on the exhale. So like, exhale, at the bottom of the exhale, I can actually start to see this starry night sky. I'll inhale and it fades out. Exhale, start to see this starry night sky, inhale and it fades out. So it's kind of coming in on this type of rhythm here. And eventually we'll start to get a little bit more clear. If I'm not really working with control here, I'm kind of just watching this night sky. I might start to see some stars start to stand out a little more than others. I'll draw some lines in between them, and then all of a sudden Orion will pop into my head, and I might see like this figure kind of press out in the night sky. However, if you wanted to, again, work with more levels of control here, what you can start to find is certain types of images, just like this night sky, will be easier for you to conjure up than others. So something that I found easy for me is imagining or seeing like scenery type images. If you read the literature, a lot of people can see faces easily. For some reason, that's kind of harder for me. I found it easier to do, scenery type images. But so say I'm looking at this night sky. So instead of, just kind of waiting to see what pops up, like Orion, for example, I'll start to think like, okay, maybe I want to try to see scenery. Like what can I see, or can I recognize anything? So I start to make lines in between the stars, and then maybe the lines start to look like vague rectangles, and then all of a sudden, poof, like a city skyline. Like the outline of a city skyline will start to appear, like start to press out through the night sky, right? So that's one way to kind of work with it. Another way with these kind of more vertical type lines we got going on. So for me, also a lot of times I'm still kind of dealing with this more starry night sky imagery, but the imaginary lines that I'm making between the stars, if I see any type of verticalness in these lines, what I found is I can generate actual visual mental image of like a row of trees, right? And so, okay, like boom, okay, so there's a row of trees. If I'm working with something that's kind of the more soft diffused type imagery light, say I'm kind of watching it, I'm fading it in and out. If I'm not really messing with it for some reason, space is always in my head, so maybe this soft diffused light might start to look more like a sphere, and then I don't know, the moon will pop into my head, and I can actually like see the surface of the moon. Another way that might work with the sphere is sometimes with the spheres when I actually do see faces or, more defined figures, or I'll be watching this soft diffused light, some definition will kind of start to come into it, and all of a sudden a face will kind of appear out of it. Pretty much a lot like, say, if you're looking at a wall that has kind of like a soft pattern on it, and then sometimes all of a sudden you'll see a face pop out in it. So very similar to that, actually. So those are some of the kind of ways you can start to work with bringing images out of this soft, diffuse, spotty, ill-defined type imagery. And really, once you start to build into full-on images, well, then we can step on to the oh, this thing is not working. Hey folks, sorry, had some technical difficulties there last night, and it was already getting late. Had my wife waiting for me anyway, so decided to call it a night and attack it again here in the morning. So picking up where I left off yesterday, when it gets to more of these more full-on hypnagogic type images, I find there's a few different ways to arrive at them, right? And so I kind of break it up into 4 general categories here. So one of them is building your way there off of the spotty type images, which I just finished talking about. Another way to do it is where sometimes you may not even notice the spotty images so much. There's already, the first thing you notice are more of these fully formed images popping into your mind. So there's been a number of times where I'm in this state, but I've also been mindful enough to catch these instantaneous moments, like before I recognize the image as what it is, where it's like I see basically the spotty type imagery, with some vague definition to it, and then my mind will recognize it as something and then free associate to whatever picture or idea that is. So that's another way. The third way to kind of get there is where it seems you're more like dropping into a subcurrent of your subconscious mind's train of thought that's kind of just running in the background all the time, to where it's more like you're plopping into like a fully fleshed out story or scene or something that's going on right in the middle of it, right? And then the other way is kind of for like the Lothenbrunner example I gave earlier, where you bring a specific thought or image down with you from the waking state into this hypnagogic type area. And I know that's like that was my first, really intense hypnagogic experience where I actually had physical sensations involved with it and all that. But really, I find getting there that way is a lot harder. Just because if you're trying to bring down a specific image, it kind of has this tendency to keep you too awake, so you don't actually, get down to this real, more clear, more vivid hypnagogic type imagery. So with that aside, I'll kind of focus on the other three. Okay, so kind of just going with the building off of the spotty type imagery example. So say we had like the row of trees that I can easily conjure up, right? So say I see these row of trees. Next thing I'll try to do here is I like to try and build depth, right? I try to see deeper into it because a lot of times these trees maybe don't even have color yet, might just be like pressing out in kind of like a black background, kind of ill-defined. So, I'll be looking at this image, trying to get it more clear, and then I'll try to see depth. So a couple different ways that may happen is, I'm not really dictating how I want to see depth. I'm just thinking I want to try and see depth. So maybe, these trees will start ascending up like this mountain, right? So now I can see like a mountain type scene full of trees. Then what I'll try to do is I'll try to seed more ideas and work with expectations. I'll think like, okay, let me see, is there a waterfall? Can I find a waterfall in this scene? Is there a waterfall anywhere? And then, kind of will fade in, fade out, then maybe, oh yeah, poof, hey, look, I can't see a waterfall in this scene now. Another way I like to work with control here is dictating where you're going in the scene you find yourself in. So say I see the mountain, I start looking for a waterfall, I find a waterfall at some point. Now I want to try and move in closer towards the waterfall. So I'll try like say I'm kind of far back from a far out view, see the mountain out here way in front of me. Also kind of just start to move my awareness or my view in closer. Another way depth can work a lot for me. Another example of this would be, so say I see my trees, I try to see depth, and instead of a mountain coming up, now I see like a pathway kind of appear in front of me. And so this was just happening the other night. So I see the pathway appear in front of me, and I actually all of a sudden free associator just recognize this pathway as being a pathway from the horse. I grew up on a horse ranch, so we had a lot of trails and stuff. But I ended up recognizing this place that I ended up finding myself in the Hypnagogia. So then to work with control here, I started to think, okay, I'll start to move through this space. And so I'm not really dictating exactly where I want to go as I'm moving. I'm just thinking I want to start to move in whatever this direction. And then oftentimes, especially if you're kind of already familiar with the place, you do tend to kind of move in chronological order, because I should say this too. Oftentimes when I'm in this space, it's not going to be just like one smooth panning, camera view as if you're like watching, an uncut film on TV or something like that. A lot of times it tends to move, at least for me, kind of like blocky or jumpy segments. Oftentimes how regular dreams are. So say like I'll see the trail, I'll kind of flash out. Next vision will be at like say the mouth of the trail, then I'm by the horse arenas, then I'm by the stalls and whatever, by my childhood home, etc. Another way I like to work with control and seeding ideas and expectation here is say, I find myself in any scene, but I guess I'll just kind of stick to this trail type scene, right? So I'm starting to think like, okay, can I see any people? Are there any dream characters, or are there any figures or any people here? So I start trying to look for them. Okay, can I expect to see anybody? And so say sometimes I might see the person could pop in fully formed and say like my father or something. But oftentimes what it may be is you might see like a vague outline of a person say at the end of the path. So now I'm like, okay, I see the person. I'll try moving closer to them. And then you can work with little moments here of trying to expect of who that's going to be. Now this definitely doesn't always work, but say I see the figure like far down the path, can't really tell who it is. I'll move in and start seeding ideas like, oh, I wonder, is that my father? Is that my dad? And then I get close, and sometimes it's my dad, sometimes it's not. But this is another way to kind of get used to working with expectation. Little side note, but another way I like to work with expectation as a general awake practice is, say like I got, I don't know, my one of my kids behind me, asking me a question, but I'm looking away, I'm looking forward, they're behind me. So what I'll do here is I'll kind of just make this little mental note in my head that like, okay, I want to expect to see my son behind me asking me a question when I turn around. So then what I'll do here is I'll kind of close my eyes so I get this kind of jumpy, quick change of scenery type movement. And then I'll turn around, like, just blink maybe as I turn around, whatever. And then when I see him, I can expect to see him there. And of course he is there because it's going to be like real waking life. But it's a good way to kind of work with expecting to find something when you're turning your head to look for it. I find there's a lot of usefulness when you bring that type of approach into your lucid dreaming and hypnagogic type practices. We have these free association type images. So these are when images are coming in, more fully formed and realized. Um, the thing with this types of imagery is, there will be these times where if I'm mindful enough, I can catch this instantaneous moment before I see the picture where it actually is that spotty typed ill-defined hypnagogia where, maybe there's, some kind of design or pattern or imprint, and then my mind will kind of recognize it as something, and then it will, instantaneously pop up this fully formed image or scenario. And when it comes to the control here, I'm not sure if this is really control or if it's more of just like an illusion of control, but you can get to this moments to where when you see the like the ill-defined hypnagogia before you free associate to this full-on image, you'll get this moment to where it's like what's coming before the image actually pops into your vision, and so you get this sense of as if you're guiding it there. You get the sense of choice, whether it was really choice or not. I'm not too sure. And then anyway, once you're inside the imagery though, then I tend to work with control as the same way I was just talking about, where you're seeing ideas, influence, and expectation, and moving certain ways within whatever scenario or scene you find yourself in. Then we have these subcurrent type images, and the main difference here is, when these arise, is they don't really come in as ill-defined hypnagogia that you then free associate and recognize as something. This is more like you're being dropped into like a fully formed realized story or narrative that's running in the back of your mind somewhere. So it's almost as if like you're being dropped into the middle of a movie, right? But the cool part here is, although it's like you're just arriving, it's like you always been there, right? You know the theme, you know the story, you know where things are headed, and it's it's a really trippy experience. It's like you're basically flashing into these instances where the second you get there, it's like you understand. It's like you understand and know the whole world or the whole universe of that scenario you're finding yourself in. So it can be a really neat experience. And then once I'm in it, again, I work with control in the same way, trying to dictate where my awareness is going, influencing thing, working with expectation and stuff like that. Then we have this more torrent level of hypnagogia. And so, like I said, I don't find myself in this state all that often, but I do know for some people this seems to be the type of hypnagogia they normally find themselves in. But for me, what it kind of seems like, it's almost as if I'm basically flashing into these subcurrent type images or storylines, but I'm not staying, right? Where, in the last slide, I flash into a scene and it's like I'm going to kind of stay there. When I'm in this type of mind state, it's like I'm flashing to all these different ones, and I kind of it feels like I have little control on if I stay or if I flash into something else, or even dictating what comes up next. But one way I do like to work with some level of control in this state is, and maybe a good way to explain this might be, if anybody ever said maybe smoked a little bit too much where you're starting to get paranoid, right? So maybe you felt fine a second ago, but once that first paranoid thought pops into your head, then it leads to another one, it leads to another one, it leads to another one. Before you know it, you're tripping, right? Where in a similar sense, you can use strong feelings and emotions to kind of guide where you're going when you're in one of these states, so whether it's something negative like paranoia, you can try to keep it more positive, like, love and compassion, or passion, right? That's a strong emotion. Excitement. You can kind of use these types of feelings to kind of start to layer on top of each other and push these types of more wild, uncontrollable hypnagogia in certain directions. And, although I've actually kind of been in this particular mind state the least, I also did have one of my more neat hypnagogic experiences out of this torrent level of hypnagogia where, I was flashing through all these different scenes and scenarios, but I also felt like I had really good, I felt like I had good control or good presence, good mindfulness going on at this moment. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to try and see if when I'm flashing into these images, if it was going to be a free association type image, if it was going to be this more subcurrent type image. Because this is a while ago, I wasn't sure where I landed in which camp or what the base of this image was, right? So at the time, I was actually expecting it to be a free association type imagery. But what kind of surprised me was, instead of like noticing the moment before where it was, like ill-defined hypnagogia, what I saw was, and this is just, I mean, this is what it was kind of trippy, but so it's like I was pulled really far back, and there was this black background, almost like a starry night sky, but instead of stars, there were these little ovals that were all in nice, perfect rows, just kind of going back and forth, up and down, all the way across as far as I could see. And what I did is I had this sense of picking one, and different from when I feel like I'm like a free association type image where it's like I know what's coming up before it actually appears. This one, I felt myself pick one of these ovals, but I didn't know what I was coming into, and then all of a sudden I just started like getting sucked into it or like zooming in. And if you ever had a wake-induced lucid dream, wild, it's basically where you'll be in hypnagogia and you'll be seeing a scene out here, and then all of a sudden you go from stage 1, stage 2 of sleep directly into REM, and you get this thing where it's like you're getting like sucked into it, and where at first you were just witnessing, you weren't in it. All of a sudden, once you slip into REM, it's subject object, you're in there. You're separate from everything else. It's 3D. You can go fly off, do whatever you want. So as I'm getting sucked into this image, I'm expecting. I'm thinking like, oh, maybe I'm gonna slip into REM and just be regular dreaming. But instead, I just like zoomed in super close up. It was like in this futuristic city scene, and there was this future car in front of me, right? Like real close, like where if I was in it, I could touch it. But again, this is more of a witnessing type dream. My body's not in it. But I was like right up close to this car, and I thought, oh wow, I wonder if I can feel it, right? So I tried to stick my hand out to grab it, and now it felt like I was moving my arm, right, in real life. And I almost was expecting to see my arm move, and I expected to be within the dream, but it was still just witnessing, so I didn't see my hand or my body in the dream. But when I ran my hand across the car like this, I felt it. So it's like I could feel the car on my hand. So that was a kind of trippy experience. I always kind of wondered if that was maybe slipping more into dream meditation stuff, but anyway, that's a rabbit hole for another video. Okay, so as a quick little recap here, if you're working with spotty type hypnagogia, try to find images that you can bring up on command, such as the starry night sky for me. Work on building these things out in certain directions. For example, me being able to picture scenery, but for a lot of people, they can like picture faces, so that's something you could work with. When it comes to the images, try to find, if you can find an image you can bring up like almost on command again. So for example, like the row of trees for me, if I see vaguely vertical type lines. But mainly what I like to do here is work with moving in whatever scenario you find yourself in, work with seeding ideas, work with expectation and stuff like that. This is also a great area to start making your hypnagogia or hypnopompia more robust. So what I mean by that is, like for me, I can adjust in my bed if I get uncomfortable or something and maintain the image. But one of the cool things I got about out of Jennifer Tumper's Liminal Dreaming book is her hypnagogia is so robust that she can write and type and like dictate what's going on and record it, which is really amazing, because one of the problems with this with these liminal states is memory still slips as like dreams do, so it's hard to recall stuff if you want to bring some goodies out of there, especially if you're in hypnagogia for like 20 minutes, an hour. Even for me, I can still only bring out like 3 or 4 pieces of information, right? So it's almost so if I'm trying to mine information and I had the all the cool stuff and I had 4 things I want to remember happen in the first 10 minutes, it's going to be hard for me to remember anything more than that. The way I like to recall, so this is kind of what I've been working on. So because I can already adjust in my bed and stuff and keep it going, I've been able to do that for a while. But so what I've been doing now is when I'm in there, I'll try like to wiggle my fingers or start doing smaller motor movements. So hopefully one day I can write or type. But because I tend to recall these things by narrating in my head, so I'll just kind of remember to narrate something I want to, or just retell myself something I want to remember every so often as I'm going through, as time's passing, I'm going through hypnagogia, where I'm trying to work with mumbling my mouth or like making little mouth movements. So hopefully I can get it to where I can have a little voice recorder by me and just kind of narrate what's going on as it's going on. And then I could, at that point, maybe recall the entire thing, which would be totally amazing. And then when you're dealing with a torrent level of stuff, can be kind of hard to dictate and control this. But what I like to do here is you can kind of use stronger emotions or feelings as ways to kind of dictate where this wild torrent type experience is going. So with that said, I hope that makes sense. Something tells me I'm going to want to redo this part of the video, but until then, Take care. Aloha.